So I've just started reading the book called Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, at Sheila's recommendation, actually. And I was um, I was noticing this sense of resistance within myself. And I was like, oh, I have a contract coming up. Like, okay, what is this contract? What's coming up here? And it's around doing the work of anti-racism, of being willing to stand up for other people, right? Not just myself, but
Mhm.
other people who don't have the same rights and access to equality that I do. And so I was noticing what this is, and actually wrote down what my contract was at that moment, at that point. And so my contract was, when you stand up for the widely oppressed, then your life becomes as close to death as theirs. So that was
Mhm.
the feeling that I had. And part of me is still feels really ashamed of that I'm, and my panic is up too, right? It's like I'm so fearful of putting myself in a position where my life could be uh, in danger, or my perception of the danger that somebody who lives in a much more oppressed way, such as a black man, than I do, that they face every day. And so I was sitting this for a while, and I changed it. And so my new contract is, when you stand up for the widely oppressed, you use your white privilege. I use my white privilege to lift them up to the standard of living and equality to which I am accustomed. And so that feels much more powerful within my values and grounded with what I have available to me. But it took pausing and really feeling into what that contract was. Otherwise, I would still be working from that contract.
Yeah, it took a willingness to be with your shame and listen to it rather
Exactly.
than avoid it and run away from it.
And that's what is, I think, at the root of being willing to um, reconsider your stance on racism.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, there's the panic aspect, right? Once you're aware of, oh, I'm okay. Well, um, here's a shift to consider. But then there's the shame aspect, and for me, I think it's very much, there's probably a term for this, but white shame, where essentially I feel like I should be aware of this, and I haven't been aware of this going on for my entire life. And I have a lot of catching up to do, and I still feel a lot of shame about that, which is appropriate.
It's appropriate, and it's interesting how, in at least in white culture, um, it is part of the lessons we learn about being white and being good and being superior is that we're never wrong, that we're perfect and we're right all the time. Like that's the standard that our culture sets for us, that we need to unlearn as much as we need to unlearn our racism.
Yeah, because it's all in a hierarchy. And if, white dominant culture is at the top of the hierarchy, then that is the standard. And so anything that's not in there becomes something that isn't right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Angie, one thing I really loved about your contract, the rewriting of it, is I felt like it provided for more range or continuum of action. And what I mean by that is like the first when you first wrote the contract, I'm like, yeah, I could feel the panic in that. It's like life or death survival, right? But the way you rewrote that contract, it's like I can do that in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be life or death. It could be, intervening in a situation with a friend or having a conversation when I hear somebody that says something that's racist, and I can, um, provide them different context or information. And so I love that it just had more possibility to it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I want to give some love to depression too, that might be unrecognized and helping you with that. because I think of depression as the reality check, and it's a systems thinker. So your depression helped you recognize the system more in reality, not just your white woman experience, but in the context of other people's experience too. And that reality check that depression provides can, and that systems thinking can be a huge assist for shame's work.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah, I think the reality part is so important. Instead of having these kind of fantastical ideas about changing the world, right? You have to make, making big movements and big splashes, but understanding that it's really about the small movements that you make every day that cause big ripples.
Yeah. I just wanted to just share a brief story, which I think kind of fits into the contract rewrite that you did there, Anchen. I have a colleague who's white that I work with in a number of in an organization, and we were in a conversation with a client who's also white, and the two white males were just totally connecting and engaging and congratulating each other on their wonderful ideas. And I was trying to get into the conversation. And when I did get in the conversation, it was kind of like I get in and get bounced out. And so it was very frustrating for me, as you can imagine. And at the end, I talked to my colleague who I had known since we went to grad school together, and I told him about my experience and that how I felt that I wasn't being included, and that because he's my colleague, that it's his responsibility to include me in that conversation in that kind of dynamic. And he thought about it, and he came back, and we had a conversation actually about caste and how he realized that his positioning in that caste system really prevented him from seeing that. And now he was aware of it, and he now saw that this was a responsibility of his to bring that kind of inclusiveness into those kinds of conversations. So that's what I kind of mean. It's like that's not life or death, but that is on that continuum of that rewrite of that contract. That's a place where, as a white male, he can have impact.
Oh, yeah. And I just want to applaud your courage in talking to your colleague. It does take, it takes wherewithal and clarity around your own boundaries.
Yeah, the value of anger, right?
Also,
That's a good use of, yeah, because it
Yeah,
was
that was anger. That was very good use of anger.
very good use of anger in establishing a boundary.